Hello, Alistair. Thanks very much for speaking to me this morning. I'm very interested to talk to you this morning about the aspects of engagement online. How have you found engagement for pupils during this period of school closure?
Well, thanks very much for the opportunity to speak, Roisin. Yeah, engagement is, I think, has been one of the biggest challenges, if we're honest. There certainly it has revealed the attainment gap that is there, and revealed it in very, very graphic detail. It has been difficult to get some of the students to engage. But at the same time, I have been very, very impressed at the engagement of many of the students. I've been very impressed at how they've risen to the challenge at this time. And I think if you support them in the right way, many of the students actually can engage. And it's about finding things that really help them to do so. And we're not really necessarily talking about entertaining things here, although obviously you want their learning to be enjoyable, but it's not about finding gimmicks. It's about finding things that give them ownership of their learning.
Great. So, what sort of strategies have you put in place then to give the children that sense of autonomy?
Well, one of the things that I would always try to do within the classroom setting is to give my students a really strong sense of grasping the understanding of the material, so that it's not just me introducing the material and giving them the knowledge. I want them to do something with it. And one of the things that I would do a lot to help facilitate that would be things like retrieval practice. Now, within the classroom setting, retrieval practice can be something as simple as asking questions, but retrieval practice is really at its heart, it's getting the students to recall from memory some of the material that they've used before, but to do something with that. It's not just simply repetition, it is repetition, but it's doing something with that. So you'll present the material that they've learned before in a subsequent lesson and get them to do something with it that's slightly different. So they have to recall it and then they have to use it. And that's really what strengthens the memories. Now, of course, doing that within the classroom setting when you can interact is one thing. Doing this from the other side of a computer screen when the students are managing their own learning with all these struggles and challenges that that presents is a whole different thing. So how have I approached that? Well, this is where some of the technology comes in, and I've been using Google Forms for that one to produce online quizzes for the students. I've been trying to do these about once a week, so that at least once a week the students are getting a chance to sit back and use and reflect on some of the material that we've been covering that week. And when you're using the forms, one of the things that I've found has been very useful is multiple choice questions. Now, multiple choice questions, of course, some people might say, well, you've just said that getting them engaged in the learning is getting them to do something with the material. A multiple choice question, is that not just simple basic recall? And of course, the right answer's in there. Could they not just guess it? Well, in my experience, actually, no. If you design the questions properly, multiple choice questions can really make you think. So if I give you an example of something that many of us will know, one of my favorite Friday night TV programs, Roisin, is Have I Got News for You? And one of my favorite rounds is the Odd One Out round. Now, reflect for a moment with me on what happens in that odd one out round. Up go the pictures, and what is necessary to answer that, first of all, is that the contestants need to know what the pictures are hinting at. So they do need to have a knowledge of that. If they've no idea what the pictures are hinting at, they can't find the connection. But once they've got the knowledge, that's not where they stop. They then have to find connections. They have to explore things that require them to use the knowledge. And that's really what I'm trying to do with these multiple choice questions, that I'm getting them to try to use that knowledge to problem solve, to not just recall it, but to engage with it. And I think if you get them to engage with it in that way, then these multiple choice questions can be really effective in giving students some of that ownership and responsibility with their own learning.
Great. So, you said you use them every week. Um, do the children do them every week?
Uh, Mostly, although they do need a little bit of chasing up. But part of what I've been trying to do with this is to try and make these more low stakes for them. They're not tests, they're quizzes. If it's a test, then it feels like, yeah, I couldn't be bothered doing a test. But if it's a quiz, well, I suppose ideally I say to them, try this without using your notes, because I talk to them a lot about retrieval practice and say, look, the clue's in the name, you've got to retrieve it. If you're just reading it, you're not retrieving it. But the way these quizzes are designed is to say require them to think, so they can't just look at their notes and copy. So said to them, try not to use your notes, but if you have to, you can. But I think one of the keys that I found with moving forward with this that I hadn't really done before was I said this to them: you can have as many goes at that quiz as you like. Now, from their point of view, they're thinking, this is great, because in the mark book, then I can get the highest score that I possibly can. And they have a go, and then they have another go, and then they have another go. And because the questions require them to think, every time they do the quiz, they're thinking. They're not just looking at information, they're engaging with the information, and that's the key. Now, I always keep a wee note of their first score in the comments, but I said to them in the mark book, we'll go your highest score. They think this is brilliant. They think they're winning. I think this is brilliant because I think I'm winning. Because what I have just done is got the students to think about geography 2 or 3 or 4 times longer than they would otherwise have done before.
Very
And it's
Machiavellian.
incredible to see how many of them are choosing to engage in that way. Not everybody, but these are difficult times, aren't they, when they're learning at home? But whenever you to get that engagement, that motivation, to get at least a significant number of them doing that and really owning their learning in that way, I was very, very pleased with.
And how manageable is producing one of these every week? I imagine that's quite time consuming from a teacher perspective.
Yeah, the broader context of this is that we started as a department, I'm the head of geography department, about 2 or 3 years ago producing these. So they are an investment. They do take time. But I would say the investment works like this, that if you normally, whenever you're doing some kind of assessment, the task setting takes a very, very small amount of time, but then the task marking takes a very long amount of time. Whenever you're doing multiple choice quiz, the task setting takes a very long time, but when you're using Google Forms, it's all marked automatically, so the task marking takes a very, very short amount of time. Now, if you're doing it once, the overall amount of time can be around about the same, only you go from setting to setting. So it switches it around. But once you say to the students, you can repeat this, all of a sudden, the next time you use the quiz, the amount of time it takes is this, because you really don't need to do anything other than copy and paste the code for them the link for them to go and use it. And it does mean then that once over time we've built up a bank of these, and we were able to use and tweak them here with this. And certainly I think when we go back into school full time, I don't see a weekly test necessarily, because there is a lot of time consuming, or it's quite time consuming to put them together. But the principle of doing this more regularly, I absolutely see us using. And also the principle of us getting them to do this at home, because previously we would have got them to do these quizzes in school, which meant having to book the computer room, and we know how hard that is. And it's a whole period where I'm watching them sit in silence. Now they're doing something, they're learning, but I'm not interacting with them. And what I've learned over lockdown is actually this can be a really useful, not only assessment tool, but actually a really useful learning and engagement tool. So why don't we get them in future to do that at home, to maximize the contact time for interaction between me and my pupils in class, and to add this other layer of this quizzes, learning the multiple choice questions. So I suppose it's really just reflecting back on these crazy times and thinking, right, this is emergency teaching, yes, but what can we learn from this emergency teaching that actually is going to make engagement and learning and pupil responsibility better moving forward?
I suppose also you have a resource there for independent revision for the children, and as the year goes by, they have access to those as they move on to other topics. They can go back and do those anytime they want, just to keep, as you say, the retrieval. It's the overlearning process that helps them to build on the prior learning that they've already got. Alistair, that's brilliant. Thanks so much. I think there's definite food for thought there for